Good evening, everyone. I'm John OLoughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And this evening, I'm very pleased to bring to you here on the show, Richard Freeman. Richard Freeman of the EIR publication, Executive Intelligence Review, which we've been taking advantage of here at McDuff Lives now for about a year or so, reading all the stuff we can on the topics we're looking into, whether it's something from the 70s or something from the 50s or something from very close to today. The past four Fridays, this being the fourth of them, I've asked EIR to give us a series of interviews to explain what I think is one of the most important publications they've ever put out. And that is a publication called The Great Leap Backward. The LaRouche organization exposes the Great New Deal. And so here tonight to bat cleanup and wrap up our 4-week series is Richard Freeman. And I'm very delighted to bring you Richard. Richard is an economist, a specialist in understanding how these things really, really work. And he's done a tremendous amount of work over the years to do just that. Richard Freeman, welcome.
John, thank you very much. I'm privileged to be here.
Oh, well, not at all. It's our pleasure to have you. And I'm going to take advantage of your expertise tonight. And you and I had a nice little talk a couple of days ago, came up with about 10 different subjects that we both really would love to delve into. But I tell you, I think tonight we really owe it to our viewers to really spend as much time as we can on the Great Reset and the terrific danger that it poses to life, to humanity, to our future, and to the civilization that we've created. So let's focus on that, and perhaps you could introduce the book generally to people that aren't aware of it. And then also, I guess I should ask, and I maybe should start first, if you would introduce yourself to the audience, a little bit of background, and then we'll get into the topic for tonight.
Okay, well, I work with the Executive Intelligence Review, and I've also worked with Mr. LaRouche for half a century now. You can see the gray hairs up here, on these questions of what's necessary for the survival of the United States and the survival of the world, of humankind. And I can tell you at this particular moment, we're in a very, very critical situation. I'll mention one or two things about this Great Reset, if it's okay with you. Britain's Prince Charles, BlackRock Investment Advisors, which is an $8.3 billion money manager, biggest money manager in the world by far, that's $1 trillion. And the financiers of the City of London and New York are implementing at a very, very fast pace what's called the Great Reset or the Green New Deal. So under the clothing of the environmentalism, it would implement radical population reduction. It would shut down agricultural and manufacturing production and would build a $40 trillion green speculative bubble, all implemented through a central banker's dictatorship. Now, Joe Biden is very much in this. I think he's a rather witless person, but he is definitely in it. And he has issued, just in the last 2 months, a number of executive orders. But one of them is 13990, which we'll see a little bit later, and 14008, which we'll see. And this was to realize the Green New Deal. And I would say that unless we put a stop to the plans of Prince Charles and his friends, the physical economy will be torn asunder. And a genocide, perhaps several times worse than that of Hitler's, will ensue in the United States and the world. So, Andy, if I could just have that picture again of the Great Leap Forward. The picture. This is a report we put out, and this is called The Great Leap Backward. LaRouche exposes the Green New Deal. And we normally, it's a for sale item, but what we wanted to do, because of the importance of the listeners to this show, is if you could put up that number with Marsha Malouk. This is a phone number, 410-299-6293. If you call this number, we will send you a copy of the report. We'll mail it out from Maryland for free, because we think this is something you should get a copy of and that you should study. So if you give that phone number a call, 410-299-6293, we will, not charge. It'll be a free report. And it's something I think you should see, your neighbors should see, your congressman should see, your trade union heads should see, your business heads should see as well. I would like to just say that this great leap, what they call the Great Reset or Green New Deal, did not start in the last year or two. Didn't start with 2017 with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This has been a 75-year project that's in the works. And it's a carefully crafted vehicle for radical population reduction, has almost no concern for the environment. This expresses the view of a group of people who believe that the super wealthy, the upper 4% of the population, should survive, and the other 96% should encounter what the Nazis called people who are unfit to live. That's what their view is, not worthy to live. So I want to introduce you to three people that you may not know who they are, but you may know who they are. And those are Prince Philip, who's the father of Prince Charles. And Prince Charles, of course, has been in the news. That's a person on the left, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, a person in the middle, and Julian Huxley, person on the right. They founded the environmentalist movement. And I'd like to read you a statement from Julian Huxley. He made this in 1946. The war was over only 1 year in 1945. He believed in eugenics, that only the fit should survive. And he helped set up an organization, the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO. And he put out this statement in 46. Quote, "The dead weight of genetic stupidity, physical weakness, mental instability, and disease proneness, which already exist in the human species, will prove too great a burden for real progress to be achieved. Thus, even though it is quite true that any radical eugenics policy will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible, it will be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenic problem is examined with the greatest care and that the public mind is informed of the issue at stake, so that much that is now unthinkable may at least become thinkable." And he knew that even though he put the statement out, if he formed a movement openly for eugenics and extermination of people, that would be it would be too electrically charged in 1946. You had a lot of veterans, people had just gone through a long time of war. So he decided to call the movement environmentalism. Now, one other person I just want to mention in this regard is Prince Philip. And he has a whole history, which I won't mention right now. But he wrote a foreword to a book. He's the Prince Consort to Queen Elizabeth of Great Britain and the father of Prince Charles, as I mentioned. And the book is a 1987 book called If I Were an Animal. And it's not his book, but he wrote the foreword. And this is what he said: "I must confess that I am tempted to ask for reincarnation as a deadly virus," end quote, to exterminate people. This is his view. So what happened is they set up the World Wildlife Fund. You may have seen this before, puts a panda bear up, looks very gentle. And that was set up in 1961, and then they deployed Philip's son, Charles, to set up two conferences, which I just want to mention, if that's okay, John. That's fine?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And Charles and others have a lot of power, but it's not certainly from Charles. But it's an intersection of the British monarchy with the City of London and Wall Street, with the Bank of England, and with the British Intelligence Services, MI6, MI5, GCHQ. There are other forces involved, but those are the most important ones. So they deployed Charles in 1992 to what was called the Rio Summit in Rio de Janeiro. It was the first Earth Summit. This was a big event. There were over 100 countries, heads of states, I mean, the president or prime minister, and there were 38,000 people in Rio. And two events, there were many things that happened, is that up to this point, the International Panel on Climate Change had said that there was global warming, but it was caused by nature and by man. And by far, the predominant part of global warming, of what you hear, is about 95 to 97% created by nature. But at this summit, they decided that henceforth, global warming would only be attributed to man. The second thing they did is they put up an agenda for reduction of what they call greenhouse gases, methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide. And these were then made mandatory at 1997 conference, 5 years after this one, at Kyoto. But the key thing was that this conference in 1992, which Charles was the critical part in running on behalf of this grouping I just showed you before, was that they set the basis to have conferences every 5 years on the environment and on Earth summits and things of that sort. So that's the prototype. The second thing, very briefly, is that using two people of Charles, this is Charles, one is named Jonathan Porritt and another named Tony Juniper. I call them Prince Charles's little green men. They set up the Green New Deal. That is, they literally set it up in Britain. The next one, Andy, please. And you'll see a demonstration in Britain from 2008 of the Green New Deal. So this is 9 years. Oh, nope, it's a little bit further up towards the top. The other way. That demonstration. There. Now, this is in Britain. This is not America. And it was set up 9 years before it was set up in America. So this was created by Charles directly. This is what's being implemented. Let's look then at a little bit of what's going on in the United States. I wanted to just briefly mention, and we have more on this, that there were two executive orders that Joe Biden put through. The first one is Executive Order 13990. He was inaugurated on January 20th. He wasn't back in his office for even, I'd say, an hour before he issued this. So clearly it wasn't written on January 20th. This was probably prepared during the summer or even a year or two earlier. And there's many things that are in this. But what it does is it says, if you produce certain greenhouse gases, then they will be added onto the cost in the cost-benefit analysis. Every government in the United States, federal, state, local, they must do a cost and benefit analysis, and the benefit must be bigger than the cost. But we're going to add this onto the cost. So if we could have the list of 3 greenhouse gases. Yes. So this is all made up. I mean, they said carbon dioxide, every new ton of it costs the economy $100 because it produces floods, it produces hot areas, and so forth. Not true, but that's what they say. And they then said nitrous oxide would be cost of $18,000 a ton. Now, if you see how these gases are concentrated in the atmosphere, nitrous oxide is 3/100,000ths of a percent. It's not a percent. It's not a tenth of a percent. It's not a hundredth of a percent. It's 3/100,000ths of a percent. They were saying that nitrous oxide causes acid rain, and it causes the shrinking of the ozone hole in the Antarctic. I'll just deal with the second one. A few weeks ago, Scientific American reported that the ozone hole in the Antarctic is the smallest since 1988. So Biden administration and the environmentalists know that. That's a public statement, came from a U.S. agency, the National Oceanic Organization. But they're using this anyway. So they say, okay, if you have a production process that produces nitrous oxide, we're going to add a cost, and the ledge cost, it's made up, they choose whatever price they want, and say that that's added onto your cost side. Well, if you keep adding that up to the cost side, there's real costs like mortar and bricks and plumbing and machines. But if you also add these fictitious things in, then the costs are greater than the benefits, and you cannot build any of these projects. And most of them are in agriculture. So you will shut down a good part of American agriculture, claiming this false social cost of carbon, social cost of methane. Next, please. The next executive order, which I'll only summarize very quickly, is Executive Order 13. Sorry, it's the other way, I think. Yes, 1400. Oh, let me just back that up. What's very good news for everyone listening is that this is not being taken lying down. Eric Schmidt is the Attorney General of Missouri, and he joined with 11 other attorney generals to put out a lawsuit which challenges this Executive Order 13990. That's the first one I mentioned. And there's much more in it. I just wanted to give you one of the most important features of it. And they say in the lawsuit, if the executive order, this is Joe Biden's Green New Deal, stands, it will inflict hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars of damage to the U.S. economy for decades to come. It will destroy jobs, stifle energy production, strangle America's energy independence, suppress agriculture, deter innovation, and impoverish working families. That's pretty strong. It's very, very good. It's a good response. Then the next one, please. Now, this is Executive Order 14008. It's very important because it says that future policy of our Defense Department, our intelligence agencies, our Homeland Security will all have to put climate crisis at the center of their policy. That means they will do other things, but they're now going to have to evaluate that. I will only mention this one thing. In there is something called 30 by 30 conservation. And what it says is that the U.S. government is going to take 30% of all land, federal land, and 30% of all federal water out of use. Well, we have 12% of land out of use. They're going to increase it by 2.5 times. It will be close to agriculture. It will be close to fossil fuel development and so forth. So again, an attack on agriculture. And the last one, please. The next one, slide, please. I appreciate it. This is a policy paper called Making Mission Possible. And it targets, among other things, as hard to abate industries. It targets steel, aluminum, and cement, and says that they produce too high level of greenhouse gases. And again, most of anything you're talked about with climate change, which is not really real, but 95 to 96% of it is produced by cosmic rays and solar radiation in our solar system. Man has very little to do with this. And you can look at maps going back 500 million years, which will show you this. And it's known. But I would just want to point out to people, if you take out steel, aluminum, and cement, what happens? The next ones, please. This is the uses of aluminum: power lines, high-rise buildings, aircraft components, spacecraft components, ships, trains, bridges. Next one, please. Okay, if we take out cement, roads, dams, bridges, tunnels, culverts, airports, pipes for manufacturing, and so forth, every type of infrastructure. Next one, please. And this is what steel is used for. And I know a lot of people know what steel is used for, but roads, dams, bridges, tunnels, culverts, machine tools, stamping and forging machines, railroad locomotives, manufacturing plants, residential homes, pipings. So this target, if you take it out, as Linda LaRouche has pointed out, you will not be able to have infrastructure, manufacturing, agricultural implements if you add in Joe Biden's 2 executive orders which target agriculture. You will collapse industrial civilization in the United States. And what I would like to close with is telling people, look, this is not something you can say, it's going to happen in a few years, it'll get tied down in the Senate or something like that. That might be nice, but that's not what these guys are going for. They're going full bore on this. I would conclude by telling people that this can be stopped. But if it's not stopped, then we're going to have not only our physical economy plummeting, but human existence plummeting. And you will see the 75-year-old project run by Julian Huxley, Prince Charles, people like Hans-Joachim Schulenbruder, for the radical reduction of the population. The lawsuit brought by these 12 attorney generals from these different states indicates we have tremendous openings if we seize them. We can bring this Green New Deal down completely and move into a totally different direction of development in America. But we have to be willing to fight on this. And again, I would say, please get the report. If you call Marshall Mallouk or text or Twitter, She will be happy to send you a copy of this. There's much more in this about the economy and many other things, but that's a brief summary of this report.
Well, the nature, what's at stake here is the entire civilization. It's nothing less than that. And if we can reduce the fight to these two executive orders and attack them and get them stricken, then we can turn the tide on this. Do you think so?
I think so, and I think what we can do is begin the real development of what we do need in this country. I think we need nuclear power plants. I think we can build them. I think we should build them in cooperation with certain other countries in the world. I think Russia, China, Germany, Japan, but the major countries can do that. I think we need to build fusion, high-speed rail, which can travel at anywhere around 250 miles per hour for both passengers and freight. We need to build water systems, and we need to get people back to work in productive employment and get them producing the means of existence and future development for both the United States and worldwide. So I would counterpose that, which we call the World Land Bridge, to this other policy. I absolutely agree with you, John.
Let's look back now a little bit, because I think it's it's counterintuitive to think that a prince of Great Britain would have such an effect, such power in the United States, as to, he has this this economic policy, creates the World Wildlife Fund, and is running this green reset, or whatever we want to call it, the Green New Deal, from behind the scenes, hidden in the castle somewhere, with his minions running around pushing pins into maps, saying, we're going to get rid of these elephants here, and we're going to run the pipeline through here. Well, it sounds diabolical and evil, but it's not readily believable to the average person in America that those British royals would really have the power to impose this upon what we still think is a free country, the United States of America. So let me turn to the third person on your little picture of three bad guys, and that is Julian Huxley. And by way of introduction to Julian Huxley, and you can tell us about his relation, of course, to the famous writer. Your statement a few minutes ago, when you were first introducing the topic, was that, like the Nazis, they would look at somebody and say, if you can't justify your existence, then we're going to be justified in ending your existence. The actual eugenics in practice. The word eugenics was actually used in Julian Huxley's memo of 1946. And I think it marks the boundary where the last person said eugenics, and now they started moving into, as you said so well, the environmental movement, quote unquote. But again, that when you said that about justifying your existence, it sounded exactly like George Bernard Shaw, who said something exactly the same, or at least a century ago, in connection with his work with the Fabian Society. And there, I think we have a historical link that goes back to these crazy people in London that decided that they really are the 1% or the 4% or the ones that deserve to own everything. And they're going to take whatever means are necessary to get it. So I'm sorry if I went on a little bit too much, but I think to start with a historical background of the British intrigue that hasn't just been, hey, Henry Kissinger, why don't you talk your country into destroying its economy? But this has been going on, as you say, for 75 years. So perhaps Julian Huxley, if you could introduce him to the audience.
Sure. You're absolutely right. It's his brother, Aldous Huxley, the Brave New World author, thinking the same way. I know what I would just say it's an outlook. It's an oligarchical outlook. It's like the principle of Babylon, where this has been passed on through Venice to Amsterdam and then settled in London in the 1700s. We came up against it in our Revolutionary War. It wasn't just a disagreement on tea, how much we should pay for tea or taxes. We had a different philosophical outlook. And I think it's useful for your listeners, and it's never left the British. And they've never also forgotten the Revolutionary War. This is not a minor point. But the outlook is this. You have people who believe that you live through speculative paper, derivatives, financial derivatives, debt issuance. And I would just remark to people who, if you've been following this, that the U.S. total debt, government, private, household, and so forth, in 2009, at the end of the last financial collapse, was around $29 trillion. Very big. The latest statement from the Federal Reserve puts that figure at the end of the fourth quarter of last year at 61 trillion. It's doubled. This is an explosion in just 11 years. That can never be paid off. And the British and some of the others they're working with know that. They can paper it over. Last year, people may know that the Federal Reserve generated almost $4 trillion of money printing. But it doesn't solve the problem. And what they're looking at right now is that their whole system will collapse. If we're smart, we will put it using Glass-Steagall through a bankruptcy organization, wipe out that paper, and wipe out the power of the City of London, of J.P. Morgan Chase, of BlackRock Investment, of Wells Fargo, of Bank of America. Take away their power. Say you can operate again as a regular bank, but we're going to write off this paper because the rates of return on $61 trillion, even if it's 3%, can never be paid off. And they never solved the 2007-2008 banking crisis, which they brought on. They just built up this bubble further, and they're going to take it out of the austerity, through austerity, of the population's hide. That's their viewpoint. And the way the Green New Deal fits into this is you build another speculative bubble instead of the dot-coms and the housing bubble, the mortgage securities. You now build a green bubble, but you tell people through the banking system and through various rules which Charles and those developed, you cannot lend for production. It must go into windmills. It must go into solar panels, which are completely inefficient. And the one thing I say on this, John, which your listeners may have questions on, one way to mark the development of civilization as we went from wood to coal and oil is there's something called energy flux density. If you take a cross-sectional area like a hose, how much energy goes through a particular area in a unit of time, like a minute, a second? Well, the energy flux density of fossil fuels is compared to nuclear. The nuclear is 10 to the fifth power. That is 5 orders of magnitude greater. And what mankind constantly does as civilization develops is we go up to higher and higher levels of energy flux density, and fusion is even more energy flux dense. As we saw in Texas, where the failure of the wind farms has killed 111 people so far, the environmentalists want to do is go in the opposite direction. They want to take us back to primitive things we had 600 years ago, which are undependable and don't work. So the viewpoint of this is that we fought this outlook in the American Revolution. What was the outlook? We thought on the American side, each man has a creative power. You can express it as a divine creative power. And we want to make progress for each human being, for each next generation, increase energy flux density, increase the capacity of man to occupy land, increase man going out into the universe and colonizing. But on the other side, their viewpoint, and we fought this in the American Revolution, is man is just another animal to be culled. You use him up till he can't stand up any longer, and you get rid of him. It's the most basic difference that I could say that exists right now in the universe. It's not left, right. It's not Democrat, conservative. It's what is your view of man? And the British want to make money through speculation. We want to make money in the American system through development of production. Both are going to make a profit, but one produces something real for the future of our existence. One produces nothing at all and loots people. That's the American versus the British system.
Well, it was the American system. I'm not sure it still is when we have the tentacles of Prince Charles and Prince Philip reaching into our Congress and basically holding them hostage while these two executive orders become the law of the land. It's not right to legislate by executive order, quote unquote, Joe Biden a few years back, right?
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. But now he's changed his tune, if he really has a recollection of his past. But the point is, well, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I completely agree with you. Look, after the election, we didn't see Biden. Most people commented on this from all perspectives. I mean, everybody knew it. We didn't see him for about 7 to 10 days, and he was just given a stack of executive orders to sign. Whether he fully knows what they say or not, I don't know. But the consequences of them, we do know. And the idea is there's no review. There's no comment period on this. They're just issued. Well, if you do that, you're abolishing, in my view, you're abolishing the effectiveness of a government. And you're hiding. You're hiding as a crash that's worse than 2007, 2008 comes into view. And that is just, we can't exist as a nation if we are to let that go, which we don't have to. We don't have to. I just want to reference, because I said something before. What Glass-Steagall would do is say to the banks, you're too big, we're going to break you up. And we're going to split up your investment banking, which is your speculative side, from your deposit taking and loans for like housing, loans for businesses, which you do want, absolutely do want. And we're going to make the system so that only those things which are of benefit can go forward. Now, we've got some huge projects. I'll just mention one. President Trump, when he was running for president, pointed out, he was very funny. He said, the Chinese trains, they go and they have most of the high-speed rail in the world. They have 30,000 miles of it. They go along. And he said, how does our trains go? They go clang, 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 clang. It was very funny because he's got a funny sense of humor. But the truth of the matter is, in terms of high-speed rail, which goes about 186,000 miles, 186 miles per hour, about 250 kilometers per hour. China has about almost 22,000 miles. I confused the miles and kilometers. We have Amtrak. There's a 132-mile stretch between New York and Boston, where our trains can go 175 miles an hour. They can't make it up to 186.
Well, let's talk about that, because that we've been fighting that for basically my whole life, ever since they created Amtrak, whenever it was in the 70s, I think. And it was a great idea, and we're gonna get these corridors, and they just never could negotiate enough corridors to put all their plans together. And the idea that China's done this and China's done that, and great, I'm happy for China, but what does that have to do with the United States in the sense of we are now in a log jam worse than that evergreen tanker in the Suez Canal? We can't get anything through Congress. We can't get our executive department to respond to us. we can't even get, the president to give a decent news conference. So I don't see how, we're ever going to get a Glass-Steagall back. I don't see how we're going to get high-speed rail from here to San Francisco. I don't understand where the idea is that somehow if we wish it, if we want it to happen, that it's going to happen. This is where I get back to the tentacles. I just think that there are so many of the blackmail, the I got something on her type of deal, and the use of underhanded, sleazy tactics to get people to vote the way that the banks want them, or the way that the World Economic Forum wants them to vote. And I just feel like we are really, really stuck. We're stuck as that tanker in the Suez Canal.
Well, here's what I would say on that. We have openings. I worked with a really great engineer. His name was Dr. Hal Cooper. And we worked out a map. He did most of the work, and then I helped him with other things, of 42,000 miles of electrified rail. That's high-speed rail, and then there's what you call maglev, which can travel much faster because it floats on a magnetic cushion, and you have electrically induced levitation and propulsion. That would connect every major city, or 92 major cities in the United States, together. And if you put this together with making freight travel at the same speed, which the Chinese are working on, and we should be, then you could have freight moving from, say, lower southern Maryland to Detroit in 3 hours, which would change productive relations all over the place. So how can we create in America? We have 12 million manufacturing jobs. That's what the most important. They alternate and change nature for machines and things like that. We should get that up to 33 million. Well, that's almost a tripling. Well, how do we do it? Well, we've worked on this in the EIR, and people can ask for our proposals on creating 1.5 billion jobs. But I would say there's two principles. One, this very oligarchy, their power is threatened. Yes, they have power, but their financial system is going. And they're also highly discredited. They're kept down by what you were saying, implicitly lying to the population. But that can go. In a moment of crisis, if we're prepared, we can move in with these proposals to a population that realizes, a lot of people do, not everyone, I would admit, that their very survival as a nation and as human civilization is at stake. As the banks are discredited, they're no longer the puffed up authority with a 3-piece or 5-piece suit. And people know that they keep creating one breakdown after another, which kills people. We then move in and reorient them. But what I would say to your listeners is, John, we can't just think. There are a lot of sane Democrats and a lot of sane Republicans. And then you've got some crazy ones. But the majority are there. You put together this alliance and you move very, very quickly on this question of putting the world financial system through a reorganization, through a new Bretton Woods, working with Russia and China. We build a world land bridge of all the projects that we have to build. If we were to build it, the infrastructure bill that Biden's talking about, which is a lot of just Green New Deal, horrible stuff, dangerous. But we should be talking about, and I don't want to put it in monetary terms because it's physical terms, $30 to $40 trillion of infrastructure. Now, where do you get it? You create the credit. People say, well, you can't. We've just been creating credit. I just gave you some of the debt figures and the creation of credit when it comes to bailing out banks. But what Hamilton did, the first Treasury Secretary and a very, very close associate of Washington, is he said, we are going to create an institution called a national bank, which we should replace the Federal Reserve entirely. And it can issue credit for productive purposes. And this is something you and I talked about, John. Economics, forget what you learned in your economics class, supply, demand curves, price, this. Economics is the future determining the present. You look to what you want to be in 10 years, and then you issue the credit and you bring together the manufacturers and industries to make it happen. Look how we did the space program. Kennedy says in 61, we're going to the moon. Well, we had very heavy Atlas rockets. Yes, and that's the world Lambert, showing how we could connect the entire world by rail systems, which will act as development corridors. So Kennedy says we're going to the moon. Well, how did we do it? Well, he enunciated the policy, created the credit for it through the government and other institutions. Many small manufacturing shops, including those that exist in Maryland, Detroit, Massachusetts, said, hey, this is the future. Let's learn if we can get a part of the space program. Brought together talented young people. Most of our moon shop, people don't realize this, was done by people in their 20s and their 30s. They weren't 60-year-olds. There were 60-year-olds, but, and by defining a mission of the future, we brought it into the present and then organized our economy to make that future happen. So if you work properly, you let the present be determined by your view for the future. The same thing for a fusion program. The same thing for building nuclear power. You have to change people's thinking about how they think things can get done.
Every time we talk about President Kennedy, it just makes me so sad that he was derailed, snuffed out, murdered, assassinated for doing just exactly what you propose that we do now. And don't think he's the only one that's been assassinated for trying to break through this banking system that's centered around the city of London. And, other folks we've been talking to, Harley Schlanger, for instance, we talk about the city of London, the Wall Street, and the Silicon Valley as being the three partners in this conspiracy that's holding us back, holding us down. And while they have so much money and politicians depend upon money to get reelected, and they get into these obviously places where I don't think they have any choice. Like a Mitch MCConnell, for instance. I mean, he's been in there so long. He's married to Elaine Chao, and they have, connections to stuff that's got to be, pretty shady, going all the way back decades. He can't leave. He's not going to say, I'm done, goodbye. I'll make room for somebody that wants to put Glass-Steagall back into power. He can't. These places are plugged up by nominees of the deep state, is, in my opinion. Well, to give people that vision to say, here is, you hear about, the military has, the 2030 program, and the World Economic Forum has its deadlines. We're going to do this by 2040 and this by 2050. Well, we need a America, 2040 plan, to put it in nice packaging, nice, here's what we can do. Here's the you'll be getting from New York to San Francisco in 2.5 hours on the new trains, and what all the salesmanship and putting together to try to get a popular swelling of opinion to go to people like my Congressman Steny Hoyer, the majority leader, and to say, hey, I know you've been, on the dark side for 50 years now, but how about opening up your mind and let's look at it from another possibility? Why don't we think about going back to Glass-Steagall, Steny? And I don't know. I mean, I'm very frustrated. You can tell that. But you have a very positive sense that we can do this. And I want to support you. I want everybody to get a copy of this book. I want everybody to study it, and I want you to share it with people, because this is how high the stakes are. Richard Freeman, you're absolutely right. Everything I've been studying the past 5 or 6 years, and I've been putting a little bit of time in to the research. It is right now. They're making a move. The COVID is a shoehorn for them to get their permanent reform in, and the horror story that you tell is that once they are able to get rid of our ability to create energy flux density at a high rate, that we'll be buried. We'll simply won't be able to produce the energy necessary to sustain our lives. And that's where, you look at China and you say, well, they're going to be fine. They've prepared. They've got the rails. They've got the transportation. They've got the infrastructure. No matter whether they have personal freedom, no matter whether they have individual rights or a Bill of Rights, that stuff is one thing. But at first, you survive, right? You got to survive if you want to have the right to stand up for your rights. If you're not alive, you can't stand up and say, I demand my rights. We as Americans have the idea that we have these rights, that they are God-given rights, that they are inalienable rights.
Absolutely.
And we are so ready to fight to defend those rights as individuals that we would never consider submitting to a totalitarian authority just to have nicer rail systems, just to have, a better highways or even a more comfortable life. Because as you say, right at the beginning, when you talked about America and who America is and the American system, it's all about the individual having the right to develop his own creative and, ethical, moral dreams to fulfill what I think all of us have a unique mission in life. And these folks that are these from the Fabians to Prince Charles today, they don't feel that way. They feel that it's just a cold, who was it? Hobbes that said life is short, brutish, nasty, poor, brutish, nasty, and short. And they intend to keep it that way for the majority of us until they get a sufficient number of robots, a sufficient number of AI machines that are going to program the robots, and then they will do away with us in some very humane way, I'm sure.
Well, I would say this, and this is what Helga Zepp LaRouche and Lyndon LaRouche, who is deceased, but who's worked on this question for over 65 years of his life. The reason I'm optimistic is just think, John, for a second, and building a world language. And let me just say on China, I know it's a touchy subject with some of the people who listen, but I'm always happy to take those discussions. Those are the best discussions because people, when they learn something, they really are happy. China built something called the Belton Road, and they have extended it. They extended it to Obama. It was created in 2013. The first thing Xi Jinping did is he opened it up, and he made a special appeal to the United States. Join us. It's not China just going to build it. Just think if we built, for example, in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, where you have a lot of drugs, you have a lot of people who enter the United States because it's a horrible situation. Let's say we've developed in this, what's called the land bridge, a plan for how you would actually build those countries, build hospital systems, which are needed all over the world if you're going to fight COVID or anything else. But if you have a hospital system, you need clean water and power. Those are contracts America could be building by tremendous amounts. We have the knowledge. We have 32,000 plants that have shut down since 2000. Reopen them, reconvert them. We did it during World War II. We know how to do it. We have some of the best engineers. We have some of the best machine tool workers in the world. They know how to do it. We have to do that to reorient it. But the idea is, where is man? Where's economics? It's the capacity to create. Look at an elephant, which these environmentalists want us to go back to. It did 10,000 years ago exactly what it does today. It takes its trunk, pulls down some leaves, put it in its mouth. The unique species is the human species. We're a super species. We change ourselves. We don't have a carrying capacity because we can invent. We will soon be living on Mars and on Earth if we follow through on what we should be doing on the Artemis. We can do these types of changes because the human species is not just based on instinct. It's based on this creative capacity, which we have to develop in our children, which is unfortunately not being developed in the schools. And it means making them relive or enabling them to relive these discoveries. Now, if you see that capacity in man, which exists, and we joined with Russia and China and others on this, like China's built 500 new cities since about 2000. full cities. We should do that. It's not a matter of just holding them up. We know how to do it. When Lincoln, who I think is our greatest president, other people may have other ideas, he decided he was going to build a transcontinental railroad. He used credit in exactly the way I described. There was no transcontinental railroad. We didn't connect anything past Nebraska. But he took legislation. He took people who knew how to do this. He himself, by the way, had not only worked on railroads, he was a ship pilot on the Mississippi and elsewhere. He knew he was very, very good on these things. People don't know much about Lincoln in the real sense. And he said, we're going to put money into it. That built Chicago. That built St. Louis. That built Denver. Why? Because when you build a corridor, which we want to build around the world, including go through the Bering Strait, up in Alaska, over into Russia, with high-speed rail. When you build a corridor of development, it's not just the rails. On 50 miles on either side, you build new machine tool shops. You can get farmers to bring their goods to market. You build new electrical systems. We could string along high-speed rail lines, high-speed superconductivity transmission lines, which will have no leakage. Lincoln built the land-grant colleges, which are all like Ohio State, Indiana State, all those state universities for agriculture and for industry. He built a new credit system. Now, you have to realize, even though these people are powerful, and this is the point I would stress, and to you listeners as well, they're going to go down. If in the crisis period we don't know what to do, we will have fascism. But if in a crisis period, if you have a leadership of maybe 10,000 people in this country who know what to do and can reach organic leaders throughout the country, then the Hoyers become almost irrelevant. Because you can't look at it from the bottom up. If you look at it from the bottom up of the Congress, one by one, it won't change. And it's impossible. But if you look at it from the top down, they're going to be stampeded by a population that needs human civilization and recognizes that's an existential moment. The pitchforks will be out. The crisis period that these people have always, Steny Hoyer or Schumer or whatever, McConnell, they'll give you their little pompous speeches. People don't believe them at that point. They want competent people. And that's where a small group can have a tremendous influence if it's fighting for the good, if it's fighting for the development of mankind, if it's fighting for the future generations of our children to be creative human beings in the image of God. That idea becomes electric. That's how we won the American Revolution. We didn't have a navy. We had a poorly trained army. How did we defeat the British? It was that idea. How did Washington hold troops together on Long Island after we lost? He lost battles for the first 2 years of the Revolutionary War. He kept retreating until he could rebuild an army. But it can be done. And we know it in America because we did it. Lincoln did it. Roosevelt did it.
I love it. I think you've sold at least one person tonight. I'm with you. And what do you think, Andy? Are you with us?
I'm with you guys. It's been a great show.
Before we wrap it up, Andy, would you like to pick one question maybe from the chat room, and let's see if we can find something that. What's David Underdown say? He's always got something smart.
Just random rejecting Federal Reserve System from Rothschilds is why Tsar Nick got the bayonet.
It's why who got the bayonet?
Tsar Nicholas.
Oh, Tsar Nicholas. Yeah. Well, the Federal Reserve System is certainly part of this, is it not, Richard?
Yes. Look, we used to have, they pump paper. It's called quantitative easing. It's a total disaster. They created, beginning September of 2019. So they tried to say it was all because of COVID, but it wasn't. Just like the stimulus bills have really nothing in real production. Yes, we have to help people who are in need, but simply issuing checks is not a program. So they have issued $4 trillion. They bought up treasury securities and mortgage-backed securities, which are derivatives, which are junk. and also killed people because people got thrown out of their houses. That they are bankrupt. The point is you have to call the question on them. When you're bankrupt, it means you cannot pay your obligations. When you're illiquid, it means you don't even have the money. So they're bankrupt because with $61 trillion of obligations in America, you could sell every factory, you could sell every home, and you still couldn't pay that off. So it can never be paid. So get rid of it, puncture it. The difference between Glass-Steagall, which would puncture this surgically, and it coming down on our heads once again, which will be worse, not just in 2007, 2008, but perhaps than anything in the next 100 years or 200 years. But that is a double-edged sword because as it happens, it strips the Federal Reserve of its power. They look like a bunch of Mickey Mouses. They are already, but it will become more evident. But it also creates the opportunity for those ideas that Mr. LaRouche has been talking about to develop a future world. And I would just say that in that pamphlet, there's not just the expose, but we have concrete writings like LaRouche's 4 laws of building fusion, getting rid of the Federal Reserve, putting in a national credit system, separating out the banks, developing mankind's development of different projects. They're all in this pamphlet. And if we could put that up, if you don't mind, John, one more time, I would urge people to get this report that we were featuring. In other words, it has this expose, but it has much more. It's the and to please contact Marshall Mallouk, and we'll be happy to send you a copy. No, it's the very first one. It's the copy of the report itself. Yes, Marshall Mallouk, 410-299-6293. I hope you don't mind me saying this. The Great Leap Backward. If you just say, I want the Great Leap Backward, what I just saw on Mr. OLoughlin show, she'll know exactly what you're doing. Get it, read it, get it to your friends. Let's reverse the process.
Now, if you sign up for this, do you get to be part of the phone call group, the weekly phone call group that you guys host?
You can absolutely be part. All you have to do is say, I'd like to be part of the phone call group. It's that simple, that complicated.
Okay. Is that do we call the same number to sign up for the weekly phone call?
Yes, you can. And I urge your friends to do it. Just say, hey, listen, I heard this. I think it sounds correct. There may be a couple of loops in there. I'm not, but read it. We've taken the time to put a 56-page pamphlet together with Mr. LaRouche's ideas on how you reverse this crisis at an extreme point of crisis.
And I've read it thoroughly, and I highly recommend it. I can't say enough for you guys. Let me take this moment to thank Marcia Mallouk for coordinating the past 4 weeks for our guests, Richard Black, Mike Billington, and I'm sorry, Paul Gallagher, who was first, and yourself, Richard. We have had a wonderful experience with you guys, and I know we're going to want you all back. So thank you so much for tonight, everyone. Thanks for being with us here at McDuff Lives, and I'll be back tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock with a Minefield show. We'll see you then. Good night, everyone.